essence, it's the part of Christmas that it's really easy to overlook, in which God says to Joseph and Mary, you're going to have a kid, and then him coming actually causes like suffering and pain, not just to them, but also to the world around them. And how it feels like that just, God, why can you do that? But then we talked about like the problem with pain and suffering and all of that, and how God doesn't choose to be separate from it. He comes to our space to be with us in the midst of our suffering, in the struggle of this world. And that fact alone, at least for me, is really powerful, because it actually tells me I don't have a God that doesn't understand, that has chosen, like, let me choose all of the easiest times to come, the path that would be the easiest. He doesn't choose any of that. Instead, he sticks into the real world. He comes into the real world where we are, where things aren't easy, and they're hard, and they're difficult, and they sorry, so, okay, I found this out. Bronson, come here. So, a lot of this won't matter for you guys, but this is one of my best friends. My other best friends here is Eric. This is Bronson. Bronson, you want to wave to everybody? Bronson is a friend from college who is stopping through. So I figured I'd introduce you to everybody, and his son, Nolan. So anyways, sorry, that was a random, hi Bronson. I just didn't know you were coming today until this moment, so good to see you. So to totally get back on track now, God came to be with us in the midst of our pain, in the midst of our suffering, and that is huge. But we're talking about the ugly and the mundane, and so today is going to be the most exciting part of it, where we talk about the mundane. But there are some really big moments in my life that I can think of. Some of them are centered around Christmas, maybe similar for you, where you show up to your living room on Christmas morning, and there's presents around the tree, and you're excited, and maybe you even know what you're going to get, right? Like maybe you even know, like, okay, my parents are going to get me this thing, and so you're super excited about it. You get there, and you get it. I've told you guys about getting the Millennium Falcon Lego set before. When I was like 13. It was awesome. Like, best gift I probably ever got for Christmas. That was a big moment where I think back, when I think about Christmas, that's one of the moments that it just sticks in my head. This is big, right? And there's other moments in our lives that can be really big, insane, intense moments. Things like the day I got engaged. That was a crazy moment. My wife left. I don't even know where she is. So the day I got it, there she is. She hears me. Yeah. The day we got engaged was a big day, right? Where that day, you know your life will never be the same. And then you look back at that moment, you see a picture of it, and it's just like, wow, what a moment, right? Or you think about like the day, for me, the day that we got married, that was an even bigger day. You think back to days that just for some reason stick in your head. Like, I can think about tons of moments in my life where it's like, I don't remember why I remember that, but it's there because it meant something or it mattered to me that day. And so there's all these big moments. I have big moments with God too. I remember the day, and I've told this story here before, but the day my high school dean came into my dorm room and was telling me about Jesus in a way I hadn't heard before. And so though it wasn't like my life was completely different from that day, I was still pretty much the same, but it started a journey. And so I remember that as like this pivotal moment in my walk with God. There's another moment that happened a couple years ago. I was at a Christian conference called Catalyst, so Christian leadership conference. And I'm there, and they're singing, and it's so well done. And they were singing this song, you may have heard it, No Longer Slaves. I'm no longer a slave to fear, I'm a child of God. And the bridge is this powerful, like, you split the sea so I could walk right through it. And you were singing that and just like declaring it. And I remember I'm standing there, and God seemed to like take me back into moments in my life that were really like tragic moments in my life. And he seemed to show me where he was in those moments. And it was crazy, and I'm like weeping and just like having this moment with God. And I can think of that as like this big moment that I will look back to and just like, wow, that was a huge moment between me and God. And when we look at the Christmas story, I mean, what we just heard read, when we look at the Christmas story, it's full of these moments, right? It's like it's chock full of them. You go to Luke chapter 1, which is where the first part of the story is. Luke chapter 1, and we have Mary. Mary is, I don't know where, we talked about this last week, I don't know where she is. She's in her house, walking around, so I don't even know. The angel appears, I don't know if it was in glory, like shining light everywhere, or if it was just someone that seemed oddly human, but oddly not at all human, showed up to her and was just like, you're going to have a baby. Which is, I don't know, like, I don't know about you, but that would be a moment that you remember for a long time. Like this massive moment where you're just told you're going to have a child, and it's not going to be through normal means, it's going to be through a completely different, extraordinary way you're going to have a kid. Oh, and by the way, this kid is going to be the one that your nation and your people has been looking forward to for literally centuries, and you, young lady from this small town, you're the one who's going to have him. I mean, it's ridiculous if you're her. Like, I mean, that's a crazy moment. So that's the first thing. After this, she goes and she visits her cousin. Her cousin who had been barren for a long time. She's way past childbearing age. And she all of a sudden is pregnant with the boy who is going to precede the Messiah, John the Baptist. He's going to precede Jesus. And so Mary goes to see her cousin, because I can imagine that the angels told her, your cousin's pregnant. So she goes, but I can just imagine, she has to travel a ways to get there. And she's just like, I just got to go see my cousin. Like, I don't know who else to tell or who to talk to, so I'm going to go see my cousin. So she gets there, and when she gets there, there's this moment that happens where as soon as Elizabeth hears the voice of Mary, her baby seems to jump for joy, which would have been this crazy moment where you're sitting there like, whoa, I can't believe this just happened. They're sharing this like crazy, I can't believe we're both pregnant. Like, this is, what is happening to us? Your baby just jumped for joy. It's this affirmation of the Messiah. Crazy, right? You get to Luke chapter 2. Mary and Joseph have to travel to Bethlehem for the census. When they get there, she has the baby, which would have been crazy in and of itself. But then all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe it kind of like wound down after. She's been in labor, she has the baby, everything's getting calm, and all of a sudden these shepherds come out of nowhere. And just like, you'll never believe what just happened. We had just a bunch of angels appeared to us and said a bunch of stuff. We were terrified, and we showed up here because they told us that there was a baby that was born as the Messiah. I mean, what if you're Mary and Joseph, you're just sitting there like, what's happening? This is crazy. And then after that, a few days later, maybe a couple of weeks later, they're there, and these guys from Persia or past Persia show up. Now, if you know anything about like the geography at the time, there's this massive desert in Saudi Arabia, and then beyond that's where you have kind of Iraq and then Iran in modern day. Well, that was Persia in those days, and these guys are coming from probably that area. They've traveled for months, and like maybe even some people say even longer, maybe over a year. But they've traveled for a very long time to get here, and they happen to get here when this kid's a baby. And guess what? They've been following a star. What? And they show up, and I mean, they probably would have stayed with them for maybe like a day. I mean, you can't just be like, thanks for traveling literally hundreds of miles, 20 minutes. That's all you got. I'm sure they stuck around for a day or so and visited and had this crazy moment. By the way, I don't know what we're going to do money-wise, but now all of a sudden we have a bunch of gold for his college fund. I don't know if Jesus, I wonder if Jesus would have gone to college. Anyways, so they get a bunch of gold, frankincense, all this stuff, and it's crazy. There's a part of the story afterwards that we don't usually talk about within the Christmas story, but they take him to be dedicated later. And when they take him, the guy who dedicates him has been told by the Holy Spirit, you're not going to die until you see the Messiah. Okay, that's crazy. Then the Spirit tells him in the moment, this is the Messiah, so he's freaking out. And Mary and Joseph are like, wow, this is crazy. And then there's this lady named Anna who comes in. She's a prophetess who's like this righteous, wonderful woman. She comes in, the Spirit tells her the Messiah is here, so she starts telling everybody. I mean, crazy. And as we read through that, like you look at the nativity scenes that we have around, and it's this, everyone's kind of around this baby, and there's the wise men, the shepherds there, all this stuff. And we kind of actually condense it into this one crazy moment. And I get why we do it. We condense it into this crazy moment where everyone's there at the same time. And when we tell the story, we tell all the stories I've just told. But if we were to go through all of those events and add up the time that those events took. So the angel shows up to Mary. I mean, that's 10 minutes? Maybe? I mean, the conversation doesn't seem that long. When she goes to see Elizabeth, and Elizabeth's baby jumps and they have this crazy moment. That's 10 minutes? Maybe 15? And I forgot to mention this earlier, Joseph has a dream where he's like, I'm definitely leaving this woman that I'm engaged to because she definitely cheated on me. There's no way the story she's telling is true. And then an angel shows up and is like, yeah, it's all true. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to stay with her. That happens, but what's that dream? How long is that? 5 minutes? Maybe 30 seconds? Really all the angel has to say is, yo, stay with her, it's true. So 5 minutes if we're being generous? The shepherds come and visit. What is that? Maybe 30 minutes? Maybe an hour? Maybe. The wise men is probably the longest, where they stuck around for probably a day or so. The dedication afterwards, maybe 30 minutes. If we exclude the wise men visit, the amount of time, if we added it all up, if we're being generous, is probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours of crazy, extraordinary moments. And if we add in the wise men thing, that's 1 day and a couple hours. And Mary has been pregnant for 9 months. And they're going to have life after this too. It's crazy, right? And so if we were to actually take a look at the rest of the time, which of course we don't have record for, but we could probably make some good guesses about. We take a look at the rest of the time. After the angel's visit to Mary, she goes to visit Elizabeth. And it would have been a 2 or 3 day journey from where she was in Nazareth to where her cousin lived. I hope she was going with somebody else. I hope she wasn't traveling all that way alone. And even in either way, she's got to find places to stay. She's just walking for miles. That's a lot of time to think. Chloe and I, we drive down to both of our, my mom and then her parents live either in Oregon or California, and then Chloe's family lives in California, or extended family. So we will often go down to California. It's a 13-hour drive. It took us 18 hours because of the bomb cyclone or whatever that happened over Thanksgiving. It was crazy. But just think, all that time, it's a long time. And you're sitting there just okay, this is getting old. Maybe you're thinking, maybe you're talking a little bit, but it's a long journey. That's just her doing that for 2 or 3 days. She gets there, they have this 15-minute freak out, and then they sit down, and I just imagine they're both just in shock. We're pregnant. This is crazy. And then she sticks around for 3 months. Mary sticks around with Elizabeth for 3 months. That's 90 days of what? Probably making food and going to get water, taking walks by herself, sitting around a fire, talking with Elizabeth for hours about the weird things about pregnancy. I never thought I'd feel like this. I never thought this would happen to me physically. I don't how do I deal with this? How are you dealing with it? That's 3 months of her just sitting there processing, probably thinking about how am I going to tell Joseph at this point? And then she has to go and tell Joseph what happens. And I'm sure it was so hard for her. And there's tears and fear over what he's going to do, whether he's going to leave her and what she's going to be left with. And then Joseph has this dream, his 5-minute dream. And then he comes and tells her, okay, I'm going to stay with you. And there's probably joy and weeping all over again. And then they sit there in shock. Whoa, this is crazy. And then it says that he took her to be his wife. They probably got married at this point. And so, all of us have had, or not all of us, but a lot of us have had a wedding. And so they have their wedding. There's probably the 3 or 4 people, extended family that are why didn't you invite us? Obviously you should have invited us. Also, we don't approve of what's happening over here, but you still should have invited us, right? Probably those people. There's probably just the okay, we got to figure out how to get it figured out, or they just did a courthouse ceremony, whatever the equivalent of that was, because they were ashamed of what was happening. I don't know, but they get married, and then there's this thing that happens that never happens to any of us, where the government severely inconveniences them, and they're the emperor at the time, Augustus, he says he wants to take a census of everybody. So now they have to travel to his hometown, which is far south. It would have been another 2 or 3 day journey from Nazareth, where they were, down to Bethlehem. So now they have to travel, and Mary's pretty pregnant at that time, like pretty far along. And so they're traveling, and I mean, I know that pregnancy bladder is a thing, so they probably had to stop a lot. She was probably super uncomfortable. They probably had a lot of stops along the way and just like visiting with people that are walking along. I mean, maybe it's not something we do because we don't have to walk places, but like they're traveling because the government is like, you got to go, pay your tabs. That's really frustrating and really inconvenient. And so they get there. I'm going to blow everybody's idea of the story up here in a second. You may have heard this before, but they get to Bethlehem. And there's a phrase, a verse that says, there's no room in the inn. The better and more likely translation of that is there was no room in the guest room. The way houses were built in that time is you'd have there's a first level where they would keep the animals at night. There's no heater, right? So they would keep the animals inside the house at night, but it was a first level, and there was a raised level. So the animals being in there, the warmth of that would warm the rest of the house. You had your living level, and then back behind, you'd have a guest room. And the reason you have a guest room is because in this culture where it's like really intense on hospitality, you'd have people coming through town all the time, so you'd have a place for them to stay. Or your family's coming around, friends are coming around, place to stay. So what's more likely is that Mary and Joseph get to town where he has family. They're staying in the house with them, but the problem is there's a bunch of people. It's probably overcrowded. And so Mary, maybe she has the baby in the guest room, but nobody wants to sleep where the baby's like freaking out. So they take him over to the manger area, like where the animals are, and they put him in a manger. That's probably the most likely thing. I'm sorry, you got to take away the innkeeper who's angry and says, no, you can't stay here. But that is probably more likely. And so think about that. Like they're in the house, she's having a baby, and then there's probably like the two aunts who are trying to be helpful but are entirely over the top. There's probably the one person who's being helpful but still is like, but she has this baby out of wedlock. It's not Joseph. They're mad about it. Then there's like the other people who are excited about it. It's a family. And afterwards, so then they have the baby. They're probably sleeping out where Jesus is in the manger. And then this crazy thing happens where shepherds show up who have been talking about angels. But then after the shepherds leave, they have to change diapers. They've got to deal with a crying baby who is not on a sleep schedule yet. They have to work through the process of is my baby choking because I don't know because I'm a new parent? Like they have to work through this process of being a mom and a dad. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks later, these wise men show up out of nowhere, and they stick around for a day or two, and then they're gone, and it's back to diapers, and it's back to like arguing over, wait, this is right, or no, this is right, and dealing with family members who have way too much advice, and all of this stuff. And then after that, they go to this dedication, he's circumcised, they go to this dedication, and then they have to go right back to the normal, the routine. And it's just funny to me because they have this incredibly normal life in the midst of some really extraordinary moments. I mean, if you think about it, right? That we have maybe a day and a couple of hours of extraordinary, over-the-top, crazy, like mind-blowing incidents that made it into Scripture. And then we have months and months and months of mundane, routine, over and over arguments, even like the fun stuff, like he smiled today and it was really cool, and Joseph got a new contract with somebody, and so that's really cool. Like they have those simple moments which are really cool, but it's over and over the same, mundane, routine, all of that. And I think that's one of the things about the Christmas story. There's a ton of things about the Christmas story, but that's one of the things about the Christmas story that gets me so excited, weirdly enough, is recognizing the mundane. Because often, you and I, we take a look at the way God works in our lives, and we tend to default to extraordinary moments. When God said something to you that felt, maybe it wasn't audible, but you felt it and you knew it was God's voice. Or something was happening and I was praying about it and the prayer got answered. And it was so crazy. Whatever it is, these extraordinary, I'm in church and I'm in worship and God just hit me with something in a way I've never experienced. I'm listening to his sermon and things click and everything is, and we expect God to come through and to be present in these extraordinary, over-the-top moments. But what we forget is that when Jesus showed up in this world, that there were some really, not extraordinary, not extraordinary, extra outside of ordinary, but some really extra, more, really ordinary moments. We're waiting for God to come through in the extraordinary, but we forget that he's present in the extraordinary. Where things are so routine and so blah and so whatever, that it's easy just to be like, well, God isn't present. God doesn't care about this moment, or God maybe he cares about it, but it's hard to figure out how it applies, how he could apply to this moment. But what I love about the Christmas story is that God would come, yes, through some extraordinary things that are obviously showing who he is, but that he would come in such a way that, for 30 years, he is obscure. We have one story. We have the story of his birth, and we have one story of when he's 12, and he goes to the temple with his parents, and he ends up staying there and teaching the teachers there. That's the one story we have of anything other than his birth and his ministry. That's 30 years of obscurity. And we say that Jesus was a carpenter. Another translation of that word may be manual labor. So he was either a carpenter or he was working with his hands, whatever it was. He was doing that for 30 years. So the God that you and I believe in, that we're sitting here waiting for, come through in these crazy moments, that God has also been very, very, very present in the moments that are not flashy and crazy and exciting. That he's present when you get up in the morning and you go through your routine and you're sitting in the car in traffic for 2 hours. That he's present when the kids are screaming and when they're not. That he's present. He's present when that person at work is so nice and when that person isn't, and when there's nobody at work and you're just sitting in the office alone, and when there's nothing happening and when there's so much happening, that God is so present. Why? Why can we have faith in that and trust that? Because he came and then lived it. We could already say God is that already. Jesus wouldn't have to show up for us to believe that. But then when Jesus shows up, he doesn't just live extraordinary moment after another. That starts to happen when he starts his ministry, but the entirety of 30 years of his life is just dull. At least according to the story that we know. Which says what about us? Maybe we got to stop expecting the extraordinary and just believing that that's where he comes through and that's what he does. And if this could just happen, or if God would just show himself to me in this way. And what if we have to back away from all of that and recognize that the incarnation at Christmas, the story that we're looking at, is Jesus coming to the extraordinary. And that's what I love about this, because it requires not more busyness, not more prayer, not more worship, not more any of that, but actually it requires us to be quiet. To look not in the crazy moments in that place, in that place, in that place, but to say that God is with me right now. And to be quiet and to rest in the reality of that. Here's my challenge for you today. I don't have anything that's crazy mind-blowing other than just this simple thing. My challenge to us today is that when you get up on Christmas morning, and maybe you have kids, and so maybe your kids are like me, and they're just ticked off that you don't want to get up at 6 a.m. like they do to open presents. Because that was the worst part of Christmas. I'm just sitting there the door is closed, and my parents had the audacity to wait until 8:30. I'm still mad about it. You get up on Christmas morning, you go to the living room, the kids are excited, you and your spouse are looking at them and it's exciting, and you look over to the empty spot on the couch and you recognize that God is there with you, present in this moment, that Jesus Christ would decide to sit with you in this moment and just be with your family. Because he cares that much. That when the kids are like, but you didn't get me the exact model or thing that I wanted, that he would look over you and be like, it happens. Kids are like that. That maybe you're alone this Christmas because of a passing, or maybe the grandkids are far away and you can't be there with them. That God would sit there with you, Jesus would sit there with you in the living room and miss them too. That he would sit there in the mundane of you trying to figure out how to celebrate Christmas on your own and trying to figure out a new rhythm to it. I don't know what it is, but that's just Christmas. You go beyond that into your day-to-day life and just recognizing God near you in those moments. And the reason I talk about this is not to try and get into this weird ethereal, where we only ever think about things and feel them and therefore they're true. Not that, but that God has promised to be with us, and that because we are always looking for an extraordinary moment, we miss the extraordinary presence of God. And so that's my challenge to us today, is that we would stop, that we would rest, and recognize the extraordinary presence of God. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you that I don't have to ask for you to be here. That you have chosen to be here not because I am righteous or because we are righteous, but simply because it's who you are. And in that, Lord, is the greatest joy. That my performance doesn't matter, the circumstances of my life don't matter, even the places I'm putting my attention don't matter, because you are there with me. But the difference, and I've experienced this, I know many have, the difference is that if my attention is other places, that I totally miss you with me. And so what I'm asking for, Lord, what I'm asking for myself, for my family, for my church, is that you would draw us, not to more, not to crazier, not to trying harder, but to rest. To the reality that you are with us in the mundane and the simple and the extraordinary. And that we would find you and see you in those moments. Thank you, Lord, in your name. Amen.
That was a loud sound. Sorry about that, folks. Can we all stand up one more time before we close? And I want to invite our kids to come back up. We're going to sing one more song today, just to celebrate Christmas, to celebrate God being with us. What do you guys want to celebrate this morning?
Eric told me 10 minutes before you showed up.
Joy. I like
what
it.
A guy.
That fits with the
Where
song.
Where are you guys going? Oh my gosh.
That key. I have something cool to celebrate. This past weekend, on Sunday, Claudia and I got engaged, which is super exciting. Selfishly take this moment to announce it to the whole church. I'm really excited. But let's just sing this last song and celebrate God being with us today. You guys ready? Here we go. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. the glories of his righteousness and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love. Merry Christmas, everybody, and have a happy Sabbath. We'll see you next week.